first thing I thought we'd kind of kick it off with is just introductions and um, letting everybody know who I am and hopefully getting to meet all the new faces here. So, for folks that do not know me, I am Emma Schmidt. I work for Bold Alliance. I actually live in Iowa, but we've been fighting pipelines, specifically carbon pipelines, since 2021. My history with pipelines beyond carbon goes back to about 2014-ish. But our goal, like just in general, is to help communities that are fighting unwanted pipelines, and we've kind of expanded that for Indiana because obviously it's not just about pipelines, it's also about the pore space that comes along with these carbon pipelines. And so we're kind of testing new waters here, but it's been really great learning a whole lot and actually learning way more than I ever wanted to know about pore space, if I'm being honest with you all. But that's kind of a little bit about me. And I would love to just kind of, if folks want to put it in the chat. I know, Whitney, you have a whole room full of people. I'm sure y'all already know each other, but if you want to just share your name, where you're from, what project you're fighting in Indiana in the chat, that would be fantastic, just to give us a bit of an idea. I also did want to just see if there's any kind of community updates that folks have been aware of or anything that's going on that everybody should know. I imagine, Whitney, do y'all have anything going on fighting WVR that we can help with that you just want to make sure everybody's aware of?
Real quick, do you want our video to work? Because it's not right now. Does that matter to you guys?
I mean, it's a shame because I would love to see all of your beautiful faces, but it's fine.
Okay. Do we have anything about WVR that's going on right now that we want to mention?
It's Susan. Hi, Emma. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. The only thing we're thinking about is what is the next step for that 60% pore space? We want that, but we want to somehow force them or have the county ask for, the verification of that voluntary 60% that's needed. What would be your advice to people on, should we approach the county commissioners? Should we keep on the DNR about what's the process for that? How do we force the hand, right? We need multiple people calling, and I'm not sure who to call. Would it be at the county level? Because sometimes we've mentioned it and they just kind of blow us off, but maybe, and some of it, they say they don't really understand it, but their county lawyer seems to understand the laws for WVR. So what's your suggestion?
Yeah, couple thoughts there. One, I think that the best way that you're probably gonna get an answer, because I mean they're a private company, so you can't really force them into anything, but I think it would be through your commissioners, maybe encouraging your commissioners to invite WVR to come give an update. They could also, I mean, if they really won't give any sort of figure, you could always take it like a step further and, pass an ordinance or something like that that would require the company to give the actual figures. I wouldn't say like that's the step right that we're at right now. I would say start off with just encouraging your commissioners to reach out to the company, see if they can't get that number, because they're more likely to give that number to someone that's in a position of power than just, your everyday average Joe. If they won't do it, you could also try and force it through your legislators, trying to encourage them to try and get this information. And it sounds like you're already doing it, but yeah, DNR too. I don't think the DNR is going to be super helpful, but it never hurts to just have that pressure put on all of these people, right? Because nobody wants to do any of this. They don't want to do more work than they're required to, so they're not going to if people aren't like just hounding them. It's the whole, squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So like if you're every day sending a message to your commissioners, to your legislators, to the DNR saying like, "Hey, we want this number. We need more information about this company." Even putting out like letters to the editor, calling on the company's like lack of transparency and like just making it a constant just narrative out there. That's, I think, the best way to go about it. So there's kind of a multitude of options, but it's kind of an all of the above solution that you're going to need.
I just didn't know if you knew the answer to, and I know there's not a lot of injection wells. I mean, you guys have been basically more pipeline focused because you guys haven't had as many of the injection wells. But in like North Dakota, do you know how that, because see, they have a 60%. Do you know how that's being verified, or who we could reach out to, right? To find out how they verified that, or a landowner that may have been fighting it that may know that information.
Yeah, actually, so that's a really good idea for who we should have on as our next like guest speaker next month. Is we do have a handful of landowners in North Dakota that are going through very similar things and they're fighting it. I would say that the North Dakota procedural process is slightly different than what is going on with WVR, and I think that's how that number was confirmed because they had to go through the North Dakota Industrial Commission and just provide all this information, whereas Indiana is a bit more of like wild, wild west territory where the company has kind of all of the power, which is really unfortunate and something we need to change. But yeah, I can absolutely connect folks with some landowners in North Dakota as well as our attorney in North Dakota who is, I mean, taking it all the way to the North Dakota Supreme Court and already won some of the legal battles we've mounted there.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody else have a question or something to say?
There's no way that they will add somebody that says they're for it, that's not even in the area or the pipeline, it's back off the way. And they say that they claim them and they're 60%.
They're saying they have their 60%. Is that what?
No, I'm saying when we ask for 60%, are they able to say, okay, Joe Blow, give me so much, okay, but it ain't even gonna affect him or her. But it's marked on the map. And I don't want them to say, we have it, including those folks, that the pipeline's not even gonna go through, or,
Yeah, what he's saying is, it's the 60% is supposed to be with inside that plume area. And he's just wanting to know, I'm guessing,
Sure,
right?
right.
To make sure that somebody that's outside that plume does not have a say-so, right? That wouldn't fall under the 60% needed, the way the law is.
It shouldn't, just based on how the regulations that the limited regulations that do exist, it shouldn't count. I mean, I can't see where it would, but I also don't put anything past this company really. So I mean, it doesn't hurt to keep people, still engaged and on their toes just in case, because obviously what we've seen from WVR from like this point already is that they will switch and change their plans and everything else just to whatever's kind of, the whimsy of the day. And so who knows? But I kind of doubt that they'd be able to get away with that.
Good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions, thoughts?
Go ahead, Janet.
Emma, this is
Tell-
Janet.
Tell them your name. And after this, after she asks a question, maybe we should have people introduce themselves, because we got quite a few here in one room, so that might be helpful. I know it looks like there's just one person, but yeah, we've got quite a few here, so. Go ahead.
Hi, Emma. This is Janet Sandhill. I'm asking if we will be able to have a Zoom meeting, which I appreciate your hosting this. It is great. I thank you. Will we be meeting with our attorneys at some point for some of the questions that we're concerned about before legislation or during legislation? Especially before, so that we can kind of get some idea of where we stand. So we're not blindsided before Wabash Valley Resources does something here before that legislation session.
Yeah, yeah, that's definitely on the books that I'm trying to just nail down a time and also just trying to hash out what we want to do as far as like legislation goes. And I think that's a good question for all of you guys to kind of mull over and think about of like, we know the law is broken, right? So how do we fix it? What do we want to see put in place? Like we've seen in other states, everything from banning the use of eminent domain to little tweaks to like the regulatory processes to like amending thresholds. So like changing that 60% to some, I mean, I personally wouldn't recommend that because I think that 60% like law on the books is ripe for a legal challenge. And I think we could easily win that case. Maybe not easily, but I think we could win that case. But I think, yeah, we just need to kind of gather ideas on what people want to see changed and then actually get that legislation drafted and go from there. Because I think that's one of the issues we've seen in Indiana is we are always on the defense, right? Like we're trying to stop all these bad bills that the industry comes at. And I think we need to flip the script there, and we should be the ones that are introducing good bills and putting them on the defense instead of the other way around.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My name's Don Bohan and I live in Universal. And we're like a mile, a little bit over a mile away from the first dump. Now, this is the whole town and there's not one person here that wants it. Wouldn't that carry more weight? That all these people do not want this than the 7 people that they have out there that say it's okay. I mean, you got all these people, they don't want it. But then you got 7 people out there that got paid, said it's okay, and then hell, they'll probably end up moving. Or not even own the land no more, and all our land's gonna go down. I don't want no dump underneath my house.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And I mean, by all rights, that should matter. And that's why it's so important to be loud about it, because if you just like quietly accept your fate, your elected officials, the company, they're not going to do anything. But if you can be loud and you can be that squeaky wheel, that's how change happens. And the more people you bring into it, because this isn't something that just affects the people that are living like directly above the plume, right? Like this is something that impacts every taxpayer, everybody that lives, drives, works over this area. Like it's everybody. So like just bringing more and more people in, which I think y'all have already done a fantastic job of, but continuing to make all of those alliances and getting people loud, that's what makes the difference.
See, we got a petition right now that this whole town's on it, and then the surrounding people around here are on it. And none of them, there ain't one person I've talked to that want it. Except for the people that are gonna make all this money and they don't care about our land, water and life. And that's terrible. And I don't understand how they can think that this is a good idea. I really don't. And then what, they're gonna take these data centers with these little nuke plants, are they gonna dot the whole line with them too and just waste the whole side of western Indiana?
Well, I mean, data centers waste the entire country at this point. I mean, we're seeing proposals pop up everywhere. It's ridiculous.
It's terrible. You know, like I said, they don't care about us that live in on the outskirts out here. We're collateral damage and they know it. They don't care if we die.
No, it's absolutely sickening. And that's the thing, like that we have to remember is like the people we're dealing with, like in my mind, they're not like you and me, right? Like they don't have like that empathy. They don't care about anything but their own personal gain. Like so often in these fights, we'll hear like landowners go up to elected officials or the decision makers and be like, how can you sleep at night? Like, and it's like, I'm pretty sure they sleep just fine because they don't care. They're not like you and I. Like they see this entirely as like a money-making scheme, and whatever happens to you, they don't care because it's not happening to them. It's not in their backyard. So it's fine. And I think that's what we really need to do.
I really don't understand how, like, I ain't sure, but I know there's 7. How can these 7 people speak for the volume of people out here that don't want it? Which weighs them more, you know? How can they say, oh, it's okay to put it underneath here when the rest of us don't want it?
Right.
Well, I mean, and that's part of the flaw with that law is the way that it's written, because it amounts to, the land, the 60% of the land area rather than 60% of the people. So, I mean, it's really, the scales are already tipped against you, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mark Pesselman's got a question here.
I wanna go back to the beginning. And I wanna bring up a water aquifer that's one of the biggest in the Midwest. I can't get it in my head that they really don't give a damn, excuse my language, about damaging an underground aquifer that trails out through this area. A lot of the little water companies in this area have pumped water out of this, out of the fingers. But they're gonna put their casing down through that aquifer. And I've tried 15 times to get a hold of IDAM, Environmental Management. And they're not taking calls. So who do we go to? If you can tell us that, who do we go to on this? This is, almost as important as this damn project we got west of us. In Illinois, the aquifer runs up the state line in Illinois. You've got Chrisman, you've got Paris, Illinois, you've got Georgetown, Illinois. What's the other one?
Danville, almost up to Danville,
Almost up to Danville, Indiana,
and that's all,
or in Illinois, I mean,
all we're drinking.
and it's coming out of this aquifer. Now, what's more important, good drinking water or letting some outfit come in and make millions and millions of dollars? It doesn't make sense.
Exactly, exactly. And that's,
How
that's
do
something
we
we
get
actually argued in Iowa, around, because like this process takes water, right? Like it's not only the fear of like contamination, but it's also the additional use. And so one of the things that we argued in Iowa was that this isn't a beneficial use of water. And so we actually saw the company, withdraw all of their water permits because we raised such a ruckus over it. And that's, I mean, another tactic to take another angle. But going back to like, if they're not answering you, which is absolutely just egregious because that's their job, is to assist the people of the state, I would again go to your legislator. Like they have more power. Like it's kind of a messed up system, but they're the ones that, you know, are just able to actually make things move. And so if you're annoying them enough, then they're going to be annoying the people that have the answers. And if, you know, maybe your legislator isn't super supportive, then find one that is. Like there are oftentimes legislators that don't, you know, will help people that don't live in their district necessarily. So that's another thing to consider.
Can I ask you one other question?
Yeah.
Why can't there be a federal lawsuit passed against this project here? Is there anything that it would have a Midwest name to it? And we file a lawsuit against this company to where we have to drag the politicians in this and make them say once and for all, yay or nay?
That's
I mean,
yeah.
I'm not trying to get you to do something that you don't think is right, cause you don't strike me as that kind of a lady. But our time is passing. This little group's been together now, how many years? 2.5. Now listen, that's pretty good for all volunteer workers now.
Oh yeah.
And we're lucky that we've got the 2 stroll ladies and you two doing all this digging. But we gotta come to something. How big are you guys?
Like in terms of, can we support a federal lawsuit?
How big are you? How
So
many people do you have involved?
So we
Yeah,
have, I don't
good
even know how
point.
many people on staff, like a dozen people on staff, but then we work in multiple states with landowners across the country. And so we also have like attorneys that we work with. I mean, we work with some of the best attorneys on this issue, in my opinion, in the entire country. Like this is definitely something we could take on, but it's just the issue that we're facing is that you have to bring a lawsuit, like you have to have something happen. And so far, nothing has happened to really like bring a lawsuit. Like we could file something, but the odds of winning at this point when there aren't any real damages because the company hasn't taken that step yet is pretty slim. In fact, that's actually what we saw in North Dakota as we tried to file a lawsuit before. We got a little ahead of ourselves, I guess I'd say, and they like turned us down for the time being, and we had to come back and file additional stuff to actually have a chance of winning. So like I know it seems like a long time, but these fights always like it's not something that happens overnight. Like they drag out. I mean, some for like the Keystone XL pipeline, just to give you an example, like that fight was a legal battle, countless legal battles, really. It was, 13 years of making different legal challenges and trying to change laws and everything else. And that's still like a threat on, there's always whispers of it coming back. So I mean, this stuff takes time. Usually what we see is like 5 years on average. If the company hasn't built after 5 years, the odds of it actually succeeding go like dramatically down. And then by like year 7, usually is like, if nothing is done, like that's when we realize like, okay, this project's kaput, like nothing's really going to happen. That's not like a guarantee, but the odds are more in our favor. And then, I mean, we have certainly seen some projects that drag on for 10 plus years, but they're very unlikely to be successful. So just to give you an idea, like things move slow, but that's good because that means you're winning, right? If things are moving too quick, you're probably on the losing side. So we want them to drag out and take forever and cost the company more money and everything else. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, but I won't live long enough to see this project. I'm being honest.
Mike Kelly's got a question.
I wanna elaborate on his, with the water and stuff. You're saying, and I understand why you're saying, you have to show that they've made a mistake or done something before you can actually go after them. But if they drill these 2 wells and that salt water comes up into our aquifer, or their product gets into the aquifer, or their waste product, there isn't any way to fix them. So it's not a question about, yeah, we got them. No, it's too late.
It's too late after
See,
that.
there's no way that they can fix this, and they won't show us their safety record or anything about what they're gonna put in place. In fact, I was told, don't worry about the safety. We'll have all that together when we get it going.
Mm-hmm.
And that's too late. That's what they know.
And going back to the aquifer, I don't mean to butt in. But if they damage and have a leak in the aquifer where the casing's gonna go down. I don't know if you've got a map of this area. You look at the fingers that run out of this aquifer and where they go. And they're spreading their plume of 1.5 miles or 2 miles. It's going under, see, they planned all this in the beginning, hoping to find something like this. And they have. And if there was a rupture in this, or gases seeping out through the ground, do you realize the catastrophic mess we'd have? You could lose people could lose their lives all around this area.
Mm-hmm.
They realize that because they put in that bill, they can't be sued.
Yeah, and they can't,
Right.
they're not
Don't
responsible.
it say in there that they can't be held accountable for nothing? That's wrong too.
See what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think part of it,
They don't even pay taxes. They're not responsible for nothing. Now, what the hell was excuse my language again. What the hell are our people that we elected in here, what are they thinking about?
exactly. That's, I mean,
Again, which we did, so.
you brought up 2 things that I want to like kind of talk about quick, and then I saw Paul hopped on, so I'd like to pass it to him too. But so you mentioned, do you have a map of this area? Perfect segue, because I have actually been working on building out a map of I'm hoping to get all of the projects in Indiana like with the same level of detail, but basically if my mouse would stop clicking, I don't know why it's doing that. I've created a map here with all sorts of data in it. So some of this is, if you want to just like zoom in, you can see the plume, you can see where the wells are supposed to be located. I don't know why my mouse keeps clicking. That's weird. But you can also see like who owns each individual property. You can see your Senate and House districts if we change the layers. Let's see, and then you can also see other like pipelines in the area. And turn all that off. And then you can also zooming in, actually see the proposed trucking route that WVR now has. I don't know why it is clicking like that. It's really kind of ruining. So you can't really see, but well, I guess you can see who owns the land, but that's, so it has all of this data, and I would love to do this for all of the projects in Indiana, because obviously there's more than just WVR, but we can kind of at some point, if we can figure out who has signed for like the pore space, we can actually calculate out exactly, you know, what percentage they have potentially, or like a better guesstimate. All sorts of things you can do with this map. You can add other layers too. So like we could actually see like the aquifer and everything else. So this is a tool that I think is going to be really cool, and I will share it around in an email that it will hopefully send out later this week. And then just talking about elected officials. So one of the other things I've been working on is trying to tackle like who is with us and who is against us. And obviously I'm not on the ground, so I don't necessarily know as well as y'all do. So I'd love any input y'all might have on some of this, but I have not gotten anywhere near finished with this, but basically just trying to go through all of the state house and state senate members to figure out who we could be working with, who we should be trying to vote out, all of that good stuff. So that's in the works too. Hopefully I can get this wrapped up before our next meeting. And then one last really cool thing that I want to show y'all before, well, not really cool, it's actually pretty disturbing, but before I pass it over to Paul, is I've also been looking into all of their lobbying and campaign contributions. So this is all of the campaign contributions that they've made in Indiana, WVR has made. It totals like $255,000, right? Which is a lot. Not the most I've ever seen from a company, but it is, they're certainly trying to make things as easy as possible for themselves, right? By electing people that will support their mission. Also looked at their lobbying. So since 2021, they've spent over $200,000 just lobbying within the state of Indiana. So those are, you know, if they're lobbying your state representatives and senators. And then if we look at the federal level, they have also been very busy. They've spent over almost $800,000 lobbying at the federal level for over the past couple of years. And just like they've lobbied on a handful of different things. They don't always provide information on exactly what they're lobbying on, but like you can see they were lobbying on issues related to fertilizer production and reserves, federal support and incentives for gasification, hydrogen, and ammonia production, Department of Energy loan finalization, yada yada, basically the same thing. And they have some pretty like high-powered lobbyists, or they did. The lobbying firms that they've hired have represented people from Bayer Monsanto to 1-800-CONTACTS was one of the people, Bridgestone Tire, trying to think who else. A ton of just like real pretty powerful corporations, right? But then if we look at the grand total of how much WVR has spent in both political contributions and lobbying on the state and federal level, $1,266,834. So they have massive amounts of money put into this, right? Which means they're not going to give up easy, which is why it's so important that we continue to just every day make our voices heard, push everybody from, you know, county commissioners to the president of the United States, essentially, right? Like you've got to just continuously be that squeaky wheel, like I keep saying, because we're dealing with some decent sized money. And I mean, if you had just poured over $1 million into this, would you give up very easily? Probably not. And so it's so crucial that we continuously just don't stop talking about this issue. Like make sure it becomes an issue that your elected officials can't escape from, right? Like every time they're holding a town hall or a forum, like this needs to be an issue on the menu. Like it has to be talked about. It needs to be like letters to the editor in your papers. It needs to be talked about online, like everywhere possible. We've got to spread the word. Otherwise, they're not going to do anything, right? Because if they're not hearing about it, they don't care. Honestly, sometimes even when they do hear about it, they don't care. But the more they hear about it, the more likely they are to care, if that makes sense. But as long as we're kind of talking about stuff on the federal level, I did want to have Paul come on today to talk a little bit about what is happening with federal legislation, because I know the Pipeline Safety Act reauthorization is coming up, and there's all sorts of other things going on. So Paul, you want to take us through some of the things we need to know there?
Sure. When you're flipping through the donations, I noticed that the law firm I used to work for, one of their subsidiaries is one of the lobbyists for WVR. So that was quite a long time ago, but I started my career in Washington, DC, working for an energy law firm there. That did about 50% lobbying as part of its practice. And apparently now they've spun off a lobbying subsidiary. But I recognize a number of the people who are the senior attorneys on it. So I worked with them. Anyway, so, well, what's going on in DC right now? To start, there's the Pipeline Safety Act reauthorization bill. So Pipeline Safety Act is the federal law that regulates pipeline safety in the United States. It needs to be reauthorized every 4 years, and it's overdue for reauthorization, but it's not unusual. The Congress usually doesn't get it done in a timely way, and they kick it down the road a year or two. So it was supposed to be reauthorized last year, but they're going to in 2024, but they're going to try to do it this year. We know that Senator Cruz of Texas has a draft bill that's not been released publicly, but it's out and circulating more generally. I also heard that the Democrats are going to try to get their own bill finalized this week. Set up a counterpoint to the Republican bill. Now, the Cruz bill, most of it is what I would call wish list for the pipeline industry. Little tweaks they want, that something that PHMSA did annoyed them. So they want Congress to give them relief from relatively small things. With regard to carbon dioxide pipelines, it has a very short section, and the Cruz bill has a very short section on carbon dioxide pipelines. And it doesn't really do much from a practical matter. For example, it says the regulations, they should do new regulations by 2026. Well, the Biden administration did regulations. Why is it going to take them 2 more years to try to do new regulations? And the truth is that PHMSA has blown off congressional deadlines multiple times in the past. So it's almost a meaningless requirement that they do new regulations within 2 years. And even if they did, that would be just before the end of the Trump administration. And administrations like the Biden administration are known for doing things at the last minute. And then, the next administration comes in, if it's the other party, sometimes stalls what was just done. And we just end up, the citizens just end up having regulations be delayed, just continuously. So, I wouldn't see that as being any kind of good faith intention to get regulations out anytime soon. Another thing it does is it requires computational fluid dynamic, or not computational fluid dynamic modeling. It requires plume modeling for CO2 ruptures that that considers topography. And there's different ways of doing that. And the industry's been doing the El Cheapo way of doing it. Computational fluid dynamics is the expensive way of doing it. They don't really want to do that, probably because it's going to show that the pipelines are much more dangerous than they'd like to admit. But also, because the cost for like a pipeline project, it might cost computational fluid dynamic, who knows, maybe $100,000, maybe $50,000. But considering most of the big pipeline projects are hundreds of millions of dollars, if not billions of dollars, the cost to do computational fluid dynamic modeling is really pretty minimal relative to the whole cost. But the thing about requiring that kind of modeling is it isn't just requiring good modeling, it's who gets it, who gets to see it. Because the industry has been saying for years and arguing for years that it's all confidential because of national security interests, that we can't let terrorists see it. So therefore, we also can't let citizens see these pipeline models, even though, having citizens be prepared for pipeline ruptures is a way of increasing public safety. And terrorists really don't need to know these complicated models in order to figure out where to put a bomb. And they're not likely to blow up CO2 pipelines in any case, because you know, especially in rural areas, because they're trying to damage the US energy economy perhaps, although they haven't blown up a pipeline. Or they might want to hurt a lot of people, but again, you know, you wouldn't go to rural Indiana to blow up a pipeline if you wanted to hurt a lot of people. It's just the way it is. So we think that, you know, when the government considers what these models should be used for, first off, local responders and state responders should absolutely have access to these models. They need them so they can keep themselves safe and so they know how to best help citizens who are put at risk by a C2 pipeline rupture. We also think citizens should know, because people need to have their own private emergency plans. You know, if something bad happens to the pipeline rupture, then everyday people should be able to know the risks and know, do I shelter in place or do I run for the hills? You know, how much time do I have? What's going to happen? You know, what are the risks I face if I stay here? What kind of health impacts might exist? You know, we think that letting people know, letting people be responsible for themselves, helping people plan for their own safety, not having them be the designated victims, you know, but rather being responsible for their own safety and well-being, is going to make the first responders load lighter. And it's also going to help people protect themselves. And then we think, you know, Americans have the right to protect themselves and know information about these pipeline ruptures to protect themselves, and that's more important, frankly, than trying to, you know, keep, you know, this modeling data away from, you know, terrorists who are unlikely to ever need it or use it or want it. So anyway, but you know, so Cruz's bill doesn't require that this modeling be disclosed to first responders or to citizens or anybody else. It just requires that companies do some modeling that considers topography, and you know, and that means the companies would just keep it for themselves. Well, you know, if you do crappy modeling, keep it to yourself, then nobody's going to figure out it's crappy modeling. You know, so we think, and on the other hand, if they disclose it, then everybody can look at it and say, well, you did a really bad job with your assumptions, or your modeling technology is out of date and inappropriate and unreliable. You know, they don't want to be questioned. They just want to do the modeling, rubber stamp their flume modeling effort, and then move on, keep their costs down and keep people from being worried. And, you know, that's what they do. So there's other parts of the Cruz bill too, but they're all either require things that the companies already do for all practical purposes, or are so vague in the requirements that, you know, it's not really meaningful. PHMSA will do whatever the industry wants, because the congressional requirements are so limited. So we expect there's going to be a fair amount of legislative action over the next few weeks on the Cruz bill and Public Safety Act. I mean, they could kick it down the road a bit further, but I think there's a good chance that'll happen. You know, there's also the possibility of what's called permit reform, which really should be called, you know, keeping citizens out of decision-making reform, because, you know, it doesn't, when they want to lighten the permitting load, but they don't want it from the companies, but they don't want to burden the companies where they get government rights, such as eminent domain. You know, that's their government right? That's their government regulation. It helps them, but they don't want the way the government helps them limited. They just want to make sure that nobody else has any say in the government. And, you know, and so what's going to happen with permanent reform, we don't really know. But you know, we know that in the budget reconciliation bill that was passed, originally in the bill, there was a provision to federalize all the pipeline permitting. Hazardous liquid, meaning oil and gas, oil and gas, or natural gas is already permitted by the feds. But oil and other kinds of hazardous liquid and carbon dioxide, there's a proposal to have that all be regulated by the federal government. Well, you know, if you all think that the state government is crooked, try working with the federal government. You know, try getting Congress, all, you know, whatever it is, 585 of them, to do something. You know, good luck with that. And so we've been fought hard during the Reconciliation Act to get those provisions out, because we believe that local governments and state governments should reserve the right, have the right to decide where pipelines go, not the feds. But we could very well see that. And I think there's a particular risk if, we know that South Dakota essentially just bans CO2 pipelines from using eminent domain. And we know that the Iowa folks are going to try to do that, as are the Illinois folks. And if multiple states start prohibiting the use of eminent domain for CO2 pipelines, a very likely result will be a renewed federal push to have federal permitting and use of federal eminent domain as is currently used for natural gas pipelines. And, that would strip away everybody's, it would be some bureaucrats in DC at the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission that would decide where the pipeline goes. And, that's, well, I think 5 presidentially appointed people, almost all of whom always forever have worked for the, energy industry, for big industry. They aren't particularly politically sensitive to local concerns, or local desires. So they'll pretty much give the industry what they want. So we're going to have to watch the permitting reform stuff carefully, because it could be a federal grab at Pipeline Routing Authority. So that's what's going on in the near term. At least that's all I can think of right now. Did I miss anything, Emma?
No, but I do have 2 questions for you. One, what can we be doing about the Pipeline Safety Act reauthorization? Like, any specific members of Congress we should be talking to?
I believe that Young from Indiana is on the relevant Senate committee. But we, the Action Network that we have set up, that we'll be putting out more suggestions for actions that people can take, and it does make a difference. I mean, we know that one of the reasons that the attempt to federalize pipeline permitting was removed from the budget reconciliation bill is because South Dakotans found out about it and gave Dusty Johnson, the representative, and John Thune, their senator, who's the president of the Senate, an earful that was just completely unacceptable, and they apparently acted to get that provision stripped out. So, it's not that you can't have influence in DC, but with Congress. But sometimes you can get things knocked out. It's very hard to pass things you want, but it can be easier to get things out that you want out, especially if there's a strong political push. So anyway, that's what's going on with that.
Then I'm going to share my screen again. One follow-up is with WVR, we've obviously heard that they're now considering trucking the CO2, which you can see on the screen, the 2 different routes to the 2 wells. Paul, like, what's your take on that? Like, do you think that's an economically viable business move? Like, do you think they actually are going to be trucking? I think it's 72 trucks an hour of CO2. I could be wrong on that number, so don't quote me, but
yeah, I don't think it's
not actually doing this by pipeline.
Yeah, I don't think it's economically viable. I mean, if you think about all the salaries they'd have to pay, and just the maintenance and the constant running of trucks all the time. And remember, that's theory, I believe, 24/7, 365. So that's a pretty significant trucking operation, and the cost relative to pipelines would be very high. So I could see them doing a bait and switch where they say they're going to do trucking, and then they move ahead with some of the permits, and then they switch back. There's no rule that says they can't switch back to pipelines again. It's just a tremendous amount of labor and transportation costs relative to a pipeline. So I think they're looking for ways to get the project move ahead and potentially confuse people about what's going on. But there's no rule to say that what they're wanting to do now will be what they want to do, a week from now, or a month from now, or a year from now. So, I mean, so I'll leave it at that. I don't think it's particularly viable, and I think it's probably a bait and switch tactic.
Good to know. Anybody else have questions?
I do. I was wanting to know if, I imagine you do, but I don't think he probably would. The 3 people that pushed this bill through at the first was Braun, which now he's governor, and then Morrison, which now he's DNR, and then Ford, which he's,
Department, yeah, of Energy at the state.
and then he traded places with Greg Good. Now he's president of Ecological Development of Terre Haute, right? So how would you go about fighting the three people that pushed it through there? And now this is like a chess game, and you got the king as governor. You got, well, let's say Rook that's gonna run around the DNR, and then we're a bunch of little pawns that we're not gonna give our lives up. And we're not gonna kill ourselves trying to save them. So what can we do about this?
Well, in terms of what citizens do, and I think it's what the folks in South Dakota did, which is to organize themselves to work against it. I mean that what they did in South Dakota was essentially we first started county level ordinances. And then that created communities of people at a county level. And this is not bold doing this organizing. This is conservative self-organizing. This is regular landowners organizing themselves to pass ordinances. I helped draft ordinances, but I didn't help lobby for them or push for them particularly a few times, but this was almost all driven by citizens. I mean, in a democracy in theory, it's the citizen involvement that's going to make a difference. And in South Dakota, what happened was many, many, many counties started opposing these pipelines, and that organizing at the county commission level and township level. And that organizing gradually evolved into statewide. The counties all started getting together. This took a number of years. I mean, this is not an easy thing. And then they started using their county commissioners and and township officials and whatnot to lobby and push their state representatives. And there's just such uniform opposition to the pipelines in South Dakota that the state representatives gradually had to fall in line with the people. Last year during the Republican primary, I believe it was 12 out of 14 representatives were unelected. Republican representatives lost their seats because of this issue. And then, once the any pipeline forces, essentially that meant they took the balance of power in the state legislature shifted to them, and also in the Republican Party, and they changed the Republican Party chair to be a pipeline opponent. The prior Republican Party chair was in favor of pipelines, and they got rid of them and replaced the Republican Party chair. But all that was done by first people working at a county level, getting their neighbors involved, getting the county commissioners and township officials, and I'm not sure what the structure is in Indiana. But they didn't form nonprofit groups. They didn't have their own special, independent. It was very much directed at county officials. And again, and then in the next fall, the legislature in South Dakota had passed a bad bill that was seen, and I think was bad for landowners related to pipelines. And in South Dakota, you can rescind a law via a ballot initiative process. In other words, you can put whether state law should remain on the books by putting it to a vote of the people. And the people of South Dakota voted 60-40 to overturn that state law that they didn't like. So and then that was against, with huge amounts of industry lobbying and huge amounts of money flowing into the campaign to try to stop that vote. But, again, the writing was on the wall that it was the people of South Dakota that just didn't want them. And, anybody who was against that was going to lose their seat, and they're very likely to lose their seat in the state legislature. And at the same time, various county commissioners who were supportive of the pipelines also have been bumped off. So, I hate to say it, but it's a lot of work. But on the other hand, the folks there show that it can work, and it's just a matter of numbers. Well, political power is numbers times intensity. You need people a lot of people be involved, and some of them have to be very intense about it and really dedicate themselves to making it happen. It's not like everybody can just vote and it'll all get better. you know, some people have to be leaders. And, you know, so that's what I would suggest. I mean, it's not an easy path, but it's what works. It's what worked in South Dakota.
We've already tried to do the ordinance, and in the bill says that we couldn't make an ordinance, we had to make a resolution. And then the resolution was, I don't even know what happened yet, but then what was the other thing that we did?
Oh, what he's referring to is that, and of course, you know, we've talked about this, is in the law, it basically exempts Wabash Valley Resources from everything, right? So we did go to the county commissioners to pass ordinances. The company came to the meeting and threatened to sue the county. Of course, they withdrawed it. Now we have a moratorium to try to get some ordinances in place that the county may need help with, which we're trying to help them. But the problem is that moratorium again excludes the company. I think they're just wanting to know, since Wabash Valley Resources has been exempt from everything, right, based on state laws, how do we proceed? I mean, we still need to work with the county, right? We still need the county to say, you know, let's try to get some ordinances in place for other projects. But I think the people here in the room right now are just specifically, what do we do if they've got exemptions for the pilot project? What would you advise on that level?
Yeah, I think the question is exemptions from what? So a lot of people think only about land use as zoning type laws. But there, you could also do ordinances, for example, on emergency planning, because those aren't regulated by, you know, by county zoning ordinances. Emergency planning and response has to do with the police and fire departments. And the delegation of authority to local police and fire departments is pretty strong in most states for a good reason. You know, it's not like the state police control everything in your towns and counties. It's the sheriffs and police chiefs that do that work. And so sometimes it's possible to do county ordinances related to emergency planning, emergency response, that wouldn't be allowed. You know, where a zoning type or land use control ordinance wouldn't be allowed. So we could think about what kinds of other ordinances might be possible. And, you know, I think that going to other counties and just raising the issue with them. But again, I mean, I've said this before, one of the challenges in Indiana is that you have just a few counties that are directly threatened right now. And that just means that it's hard to get other people's attention. And but that doesn't mean that it's going to stay that way. You know, the more CO2 pipelines and CO2 projects are proposed for Indiana, and you know, the industry seems to be more and more interested in Indiana because Illinois is a problem. You know, South Dakota is a problem, and Iowa might end up banning CO2 pipelines. And, you know, so they'll just keep going to the next place. So if, you know, the more we win in other states, the more likely Indiana is frankly under threat. So part of, you know, with any kind of campaign, any kind of strategic analysis is understanding that timing is a really important piece of this. You know, that you can't force certain things early because people just won't care. But you can get ready in anticipation that they're going to the companies will take actions that will threaten more people, and be prepared to you know, help educate them and engage them. And that's just the truth of it. You know, you in some ways you can't push a rope. You got to get people, you know, pulling all in the same direction, but they're not going to start pulling until they feel threatened. So I mean, I hate to say it, but because you know, you guys are immediately at threat, but part of, I think, your planning is to keep doing what you're doing at you know, in your own counties and with this particular situation, educate, raise the issue generally with the public, talk about, you know, eminent domain concerns quite a bit, just get everybody sensitized to it. And as more projects roll out, you'll already have, you know, tilled the soil and planted seeds that hopefully will mean that if they start rolling out big projects in Indiana, there'll be a lot of fruit to be, you know, a harvest to be reaped that you've already sowed. Yeah, it's just hard to get people involved until they feel threatened, and they just aren't yet. But that doesn't mean you can't do things now. You can certainly do things now. Just have to be realistic about what you're going to get out of it. And, you know, and again, hopefully everything, all the chaos of the federal level will mean that the projects that you're facing won't move ahead because, you know, they just don't get funded, or the funding is insecure, or the investors, you know, wear out. I mean, you look at all that money they spent, which was in lobbying plus political donations, what, 101, what was it? 1.2 million or something?
Yeah.
Something north of $1 million. I mean, some investor put that money in there, right? And, you know, they don't want to get nothing on their investment, but at the same time, how much longer are they going to keep putting money into it? You know, and if it doesn't seem like the project's going to be rolling ahead, then at some point they could just, you know, fund the investments could just dry up. So we'll see. I mean, you know, I wish there was a magic bullet on this, but there really isn't. Keep doing what you're doing, you know, keep educating people around the state. You know, raise concern, make clear that this could roll out to other places, and as new projects get rolled out, you know, you know, hopefully we can all work together to identify the people who are at risk and, you know, get them up to speed much more quickly than they would have gotten up otherwise. And, you know, the more states in the Midwest that ban CO2 or eminent domain for CO2, if Iowa pulls it off, you know, it'll start becoming a movement. You know, and then people can go and say, well, Iowa said screw this, and you know, South Dakota did, and if Illinois does, which I kind of doubt it, but it's possible, you know, then more and more people will say, yeah, we don't want it either, you know, and we'll see.
We got one question. Is there, okay, in the ordinances, have you, or do you know counties that have put forth ordinances with, you know, like you said, emergency management information that would help us? I mean, we could talk to them about those types of ordinances, and I think one of the problems is I think our county truly needs help with, they want to put forth the ordinances, right? But I think they don't know what ordinances put forth, and then they just put an ordinance that said we ban it, and then that's when they came back and said, well, we'll sue you. And you also have to keep in mind, a lot of us think that the county lawyer is not working in, I mean, I'm not saying that he's working for the company, but he's sure not putting forth the ideas of, okay, what can the county do? He basically knew all the laws that favored Wabash Valley Resources, but he didn't even know about the 60%, the verification of the voluntary easements. So I don't think he's helping the county per se. So if we, the citizens, could help the county and send them emails and information, I know all these people sitting in this room would do that.
Yeah, I mean, and you know, the same thing happened, exact same thing happened in South Dakota. You know, the county attorneys there are actually employed by the Attorney General of the state. They're all part of the same agency. And the Attorney General of the state was very much a pipeline supporter. So all the county attorneys have been a royal pain in South Dakota. But, you know, the citizens just kept pushing and pushing and pushing on the politicians. And eventually they just went around them and got the state to ban use of eminent domain for CO2. You know, you know, it's not to say you can't push back on the county attorneys, but it's not unexpected for them to do that kind of thing. Yeah, and we could certainly talk about, I think I've got some models to talk about with emergency response and, you know, and what what counties could do on the emergency response side. And, you know, there may be some other kinds of things that we can dream up too. You know, the Eighth Circuit ruling on pipeline abandonment, for example, you know, was problematic. But it's not really even related to pipeline safety, so I'm not exactly sure why. You know, how it can be even, you know, an abandoned pipeline isn't moving any product, it's just rusting steel in the ground. So how does that relate to pipeline safety, you know? But, you know, the courts are not always helpful, so, and usually are not helpful, but sometimes. Anyway, but yeah, we could talk about what kinds of ordinances might be possible in the context. And again, I'm not an Indiana attorney, so I'm not really familiar with Indiana law related to what counties can do versus what the state can do in any particular situation. But, you know, we can certainly look into that more. Emma, did you know if the attorneys that you guys worked with a little bit before had looked into that? Written any memos on it or something?
I think we did talk about it. I'll have to go back through my emails and search.
Yeah, because you know, every state is different in terms of what the balance of power between state and local governments on these kinds of issues. And it's often quite a technical legal question, and you know, I just don't know what it answers in Indiana. So usually, I mean, the general rule is that if a state legislature regulates pretty thoroughly in a particular area, then usually counties can, but it depends. Some states say that any kind of overrule of county authority has to be by express legislative, you know, authority. Otherwise, the courts have to try to use both the county and state laws. You know, other states like Minnesota just simply flat out prohibit any county action on pipelines. South Dakota, it's sort of a combination. The state legislature has said that county ordinances will stay in place unless the Public Utility Commission finds they're superseded under specific grounds. So essentially, it says, you know, if the county ordinances are reasonable, they get applied, and if they're not, then the state can overrule them. So it's kind of an ad hoc case-by-case basis in South Dakota. Similar in North Dakota, that's under litigation right now. But, you know, we just look into what the situation is in Indiana and understand what's legally possible and what's not.
Can I ask?
All right, thank you,
Can I
Paul.
ask you one quick
Mike-
question?
Mike Kelly's got a question, yeah.
And you referred to, they don't put out information because terrorists might hit on that or whatever. Actually, I think they're, without saying specifically who, what would a terrorist do if he came here? He's doing exactly what they do. He's trying to depopulate the area by poisoning the water supply. And he's taking no credit. He's taking tax dollars to do it. And he's taken from other countries or whoever's invested in this. And there wouldn't be any better way for them to make, and they didn't start. Everybody starts talking about carbon, but it's not here. It's supercritical carbon. It's compressed to high pressure and it's going to go to our aquifer. And there is no fix for that. So they're going to depopulate all this area. And you know, the politicians will lose out too because they won't get any votes. Remember? If there's no people here, it'll be over. It would be the best way to depopulate an area, and I haven't heard them say anything about helping the country as far as helping the state or anybody. They haven't produced anything since 2013, I don't believe, except misery. I'm sorry, I didn't want to get too critical, but
You know, I think the best way to keep everybody safe is by having more people be involved.
okay.
The more eyes there are, the more people aware there are, you know, because frankly, the security services can't be everywhere all the time. And, you know, and that's just the truth. So what, you know, keeps people safe primarily is strong communities, I think. You know, it's where there's lawlessness, where there are people who are just hide and don't really watch out for each other. You know, that's the kind of place, you know, the kind of places that are the most dangerous to be in. And I think we see that around the world where there's lawlessness. It's quite dangerous and much easier for, you know, bad actors to move. So again, I think that the more people understand the risks and what this technology can do, and try to keep it away from people, but also if it's not needed, which we think is not needed at all, just not build it in the first place. I mean, the safest CO2 pipeline is one that's not built. Right? So, you know, I think that one of the things that we can do is to try to make the laws stronger so that we keep our community safe. But another we can do is to not do dumb things in the first place.
Mm-hmm. I think too, like just this is an industry that is always used to getting their own way, right? Like, so any bit of resistance is just, it's kind of foreign to them. And so the more and more that you can mount that resistance, that opposition amongst your community, I mean, every person that's against this project is a win, right? Because it's just, the industry's not used to it. It really throws them for a loop. So being able to just continuously push them on the fact that this project isn't wanted is a major success.
Yeah, and again, speaking of Iowa, the governor's not running for reelection. Joni Ernst, the senator, is not running for reelection. We don't know exactly why, but part of it we think is because the pipeline issue is just so hot and it's such there's no way to win it for them. Because the rich people want them to build these pipelines, and like 80%, 78% of the state in a poll said they don't want the pipelines. That puts them in a hard situation. I mean, they're willing to ignore public opinion to a significant degree a lot of the times, but at a certain point, they can't ignore it. And then the game no longer gets fun, is no longer fun and lucrative for them. They just get yelled at all the time and run against, and their jobs become tremendously harder, and maybe they just wussed out. I don't know, maybe they got other good reasons, but I think that this pipeline issue is really quite remarkable in the United States because it is galvanizing people from many different backgrounds and many different perspectives, and saying, stop, this, enough is enough. We don't want this stuff. And, we understand you get a lot of money from rich people to help them, but no, you're just going to stop. And that's essentially what the people in South Dakota said. And again, maybe Iowa will do it. And the more states that do it, the more likely that more states will do it. So, because the pitch for carbon dioxide pipelines is just so weak. It's really just a money grab. And I think we all understand that.
Well, perfect. I know we're over time, so unless we have any other questions, we can probably wrap up. We do have the next monthly meeting scheduled for October 12th at 4 p.m. So it's the same Zoom link, same time, everything else, just second Tuesday of October, not Tuesday, Sunday of October. So mark your calendars, invite your friends. Hopefully we can continue to grow this group and just get more and more people involved and up to date and eventually stop these projects.
Same bold time, same bold channel.
Amazing. All right. Thank you all so much.
Have a great
Take
night.
care.
Bye.
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 Talk soon.